QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Bank rules. Same vendor, filter by amount. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our bank feeds test file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown, selecting the open windows list. We're now going to be taking a look at some bank rules. So to do so, let's open up our bank feeds by going to the dropdown on the banking and the bank feeds. We're going to look at the bank feeds center. Here we are in our checking account bank feeds. We're thinking about bank rules by amount. Now, one way you can apply a bank rule by amount, which would be quite common, is if you have different things that you're going to be purchasing from the same vendor. If it's going to be a warehouse store like Office Depot or Staples, or in our case, we got Costco here. If you're purchasing something under a certain amount, maybe then you're going to say apply it to one location such as supplies or something like that. And if you purchase it for over some amount, you might then consider, well, this doesn't look like normal supplies anymore. I at least want to double check it and see if it's going to be something greater that I need to capitalize. So you might want to set up a rule such as that. So, and this would often apply for kind of stores like we say, like the stores where you buy different things from, if like an Amazon or an Office Depot or a Home Depot possibly, or something like that, where you buy standard supplies and then you also buy something, you could buy something that would be over that and possibly necessary to be capitalized. So we have a bank rule set up. Now, obviously, if you find some item and you want to set up a rule within it, then you can find the item and you can go to the rules within any items. This is just for an example. Whatever item you're looking at, you can hit the drop down and go to add more details, and then you can use that to start your rule. Once the rules have been created, or if you want to start a new rule, then you can go up top to the rules up top, and you can start a new rule up here. Now, we had a rule that we set down earlier with regards to Costco. So let's just apply that one. Let's just look at it in more detail. So we set up this rule. If we go into edit the rule, Costco is going to be our example of a situation where we're going to buy something that we think are supplies. And then if we go over a certain dollar amount, we're going to assume that something was purchased beyond like the norm. And therefore, it shouldn't be going to possibly just an expense account, but may need to be capitalized. So one way you can create a rule like that is I'm going to say the rule is for Costco. It's going to be money out. And we have to have all of these that are going to be then, all of these conditions need to be met, not just any, but all. So any would be either one of them met. We need all of these to be met. One is going to be the description, which contains Costco in it. So that's going to tie in Costco and again, any kind of warehouse store this might be appropriate. And then you want another one, which means you're going to add a line item. So we added a line item, keyword here being and rather than or, because we have all conditions necessary to be met. And now we're going to say that this is going to be not a description rule, but an amount rule. So now we have an amount rule, and we want this to be less than some dollar amount, whatever dollar amount we think is going to be the minimum dollar amount for us to think about putting it somewhere other than what we normally put it to. We're going to choose 500 here. We then chose 500. 500 does not have to be the only amount, right? You might say supplies should be under like 100 or 200 or something like that, and you would feel comfortable putting it to supplies. If it's over a few $100s, maybe you start thinking that I should review this transaction. So if you just put it under this amount or less, possibly, you're going to say, hey, that's under the minimum. Maybe I just put all that to supplies. Maybe I just put everything from that category to supplies. If it goes over that 500, this rule will no longer apply to it. And maybe you don't set any other rule to apply to it so that no rule will be applied, and you'll review that transaction before you add it to the books. And in that case, you can decide whether or not it should be capitalized or something like that. Or you can set up another rule, also go into Costco, similar to this rule, but for amounts over the $500, and then you could set them to a different amount, possibly capitalizing at that point in time. So again, you can kind of leave it where it's at here, and then review any item that's over that. For example, if I apply this rule, and we say, okay, and then if I go to uncategorized items, if any item from Costco is over the 500, it would then appear here in uncategorized, and I would have to then check it out and approve it. If it's under 500, then it's going to go over here to recognized, and I might be a little less vigilant in checking these out. And I might just approve these a little bit more quickly than it would if they're in unrecognized. Now, if I want a dollar limitation for it to be over that amount, and then it to go to some other accounts such as equipment or something like that, I can then set another rule. So I can go up into the rules up top here, and then we can say add rule, and we're gonna have the same item here that the name is gonna be, I'm gonna say Costco over 500 rule. And then we're gonna say this has to be all. We'd have a similar kind of description here. This is going to be first the description, and it's going to contains Costco. I'm going to say Costco. I believe it was all capital. I don't think it matters. I don't think it's going to be case sensitive, but I'll keep it all capital. And then I'm going to add another rule and say, now there's my amount rule. So here's going to be the amount. We want this then to be over, greater than the $500. So the $500. Now there is a question here. What if it's exactly $500? Then what are you going to do with it? You could have a rule to deal with the exact 500. Maybe if it's exactly 500, I'm assuming, since it doesn't say greater than or less than or equal to, it's going to then show up as not recorded. So if you have an exactly $500 amount, it probably won't be applied to the rule, is my guess here. So anyway, we're going to rename the payee is going to be Costco. So we're going to say Costco. And now the account is not going to go to supplies, but this time I'm going to capitalize it. And I want anything over the 500 then to go to equipment. So we could set up this rule. Now, again, if it's over 500, you probably want to review it. So I may not actually set up the second rule to automatically apply items over 500. I might prefer personally to keep them in uncategorized or unrecognized so that I can then check them out, assign them to equipment, because when you do assign them to equipment, you want to make sure that you have the supporting documentation so that you can provide that to your tax preparer at the end of the year or track the depreciation related to it. But this is an example of how you can kind of split out the same vendor based on dollar amount with multiple rules. So I'm going to say save, and notice again, if you wanted more variance than that also, if it was over 500 and you want like 500 and then less than, you could say over 500, add another rule here, and then say amount rule, and it has to be less than 1,000. So possibly you have supplies going to everything up to 500, possibly anything from 500 to 1,000, you have to purchases maybe. Maybe your purchases for like inventory would be between that range. And then over that amount, you might say that would probably be equipment or something like that. And possibly then you have that limitation again that you would then say anything over that amount then would still be uncategorized. And I want to review anything that's over $1,000 before I approve it. I want to make sure it's not automatically assigned out. I want to take a look at it. So you might do something, you can do multiple levels of the categorization, applying the same vendor activity to different levels based on the amount.